La emisión está comenzando. Todos los asistentes están en modo de solo escucha.
Okay. So good morning everybody. We are about to start the presentation from today. So I'm Miguel Garcia from Blockchers, and today we have with us Anne-Luz from Eco Funding. She will be presenting us how to raise funds using STOs. So Anne, now the floor is yours. All the assistants are muted, but in case they want to ask questions, they have the chat window, or they can raise up their hands and we will open their microphones. So thank you very much, Anne, for being here with us today, and also Alastria for organizing. So now it's your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Anne-Luz van den Ende. Today I'll be talking about security token offerings as an alternative way to gain finance for startups or existing companies. To briefly give a view of what I will be talking about, I will briefly introduce myself, and afterwards I will be explaining in more detail what security tokens are. I will tell you about the legal requirements with a special focus on the European Union, the technical aspects of these type of financial products, and what the process of launching an STO looks like. So to briefly introduce myself, as I already said, my name is Anne-Luz van den Ende. I'm the Chief Product Officer of Eco Funding, which is a company that digitizes assets on the blockchain. I have a background in marketing and started to evolve more towards product profile, and for the past 2.5 years I've been involved in the blockchain industry with a special focus on digitizing assets. So to give you an explanation of what security tokens are in a security token offering, which is basically the name for the fundraising process, they are basically traditional financial instruments, assets and securities digitized on a blockchain. And that process of digitizing these traditional financial instruments is called tokenization. So basically, when we speak about a security token, we speak about a traditional financial product, but with a digital representation. And the name security token offering is basically the name for the initial issuance of these financial products. These financial products can be a variety of products, from equity and debt to fractional ownership, for example, in the case of real estate. You may ask yourself, why should we tokenize securities? Why should we digitalize them by using blockchain technology? And basically, for startups or for companies that want to raise funds, it has a benefit that you can access a global market of investors, or at least a broader market than just your local market, and you can accept more investors in an easier way. It improves liquidity for investors as the tokens are digital and very easily traded in a big community, even globally in secondary markets. The assets are programmed, which basically means that the rights of the investor are stated in smart contracts, and tasks such as the payment of dividends and interest are all automated. Next to that, it allows fractional and trustless ownership, and this benefit is very positive for projects that, for example, have like real estate or art that want to have more than one ownership, because it basically optimizes the whole process of the management of the ownership of the space and the rights. And in this case as well, the liquidity is a big benefit, as if one of the owners wants to leave, he can leave without having to deal with all the other owners in the process. And for all the security tokens, the post-raise valuation is real-time and market-driven, as these tokens, once the issuance period has finished, can enter secondary markets, and then the price obviously is real-time and 24 hours. You may ask yourself, what kind of products can be tokenized, and for who is tokenization? What we've noticed is mainly there are startups and scale that look for funding to expand their activities or to basically grow their company. A different type of traditional financial instruments can be tokenized. For example, equity, and the equity can have voting rights or no voting rights. Different types of debt can be tokenized, such as participative loan, convertible notes, fixed or variable rate bonds. And then the other type of asset, which I already briefly mentioned, it can be tokenized as real estate, art, or other projects that have fractional ownership. As tokenization of it makes it easier to manage these type of ownerships and also enhances the liquidity, as one can very easily step out of their ownership position. And then there's a third side of tokenization, which is the utilities. This is kind of related to what used to be an ICO. These type of tokens, they basically represent the future access to a product or service or a utility within a certain platform, for example. These kind of tokens, they do not represent an investment. From a legal perspective, they can just represent a utility, and we see these kind of products mainly in a way of an engagement. So in certain apps or platforms, there's for example, tokens that engage with the user and the product, and it's basically a way of interacting with the platform. But what is very clear is that the security tokens, they always represent traditional financial instruments like equity, debt, etc., or they represent assets such as, for example, real estate. And a utility never has that component of the backing of a security or an asset and represents a utility. And from a legal perspective, this makes a very big difference because everything which falls under the security tokens or the STOs, they are classified as private placements, and therefore they have to comply with certain legal requirements, whereas a utility is not seen as an investment and they fall under another legal requirements that are a little bit more flexible than those of security tokens. However, from the point of view of an investor, obviously security tokens are often a lot more interesting because they do represent an investment and they give them rights to receive dividends or interest. And that is not the case of a utility token, where the price is basically set by what is being traded in the secondary market, or it has even a fixed price within the platform or service that it has issued. When we look at the legal requirements of STOs, over the past 1.5 years, there has been more and more clearance on how to launch security tokens out of the European Union. This is something that before that was very unclear, and that's why we've seen that this market is starting to develop more and more in Europe, especially just because there are guidelines and rules being set from the European Union, but also from the individual countries, which makes it very clear on how to fully compliant launch security tokens. So basically what we see in most of the legal documents that have been issued from institutions such as the ESMA, the European Financial Authority, or in the case where we are based, Spain, the CNMV, they basically classify security tokens as a digital representation of a traditional financial instrument, and they classify them often as private placements. So that basically means that there's not a need for a financial supervisor to approve the prospectus, like in the case of Spain. In Spain, the security token directly becomes a private placement, and therefore there's no need for the CNMV, which is the Spanish Financial Authority, to intervene in the process of validating the prospectus, etc., or to talk with them even. What they did say in Spain, but also on a European level, is that the intervention of a broker-dealer is required. They do not need to take care of the placement and custody, but they do need to validate the investment memorandum and oversee the process. So basically, that is a part of when you launch an STO, once the financial product has been defined and the white paper investment memorandum has been made, a broker-dealer intervenes to basically oversee the memorandum, to make sure that the business plan is clear, that the data provided is understandable, and that it's the information that they provide is enough for an investor to make a well-thought decision, and also has been informed enough about the risk that these kind of investments carry with them. One of the legal requirements or limitations when it comes to security tokens is because it's a private placement, is the amount of retail investors that can invest. So basically, retail investors altogether cannot invest of more than 5 million euros in the round. up to 150 retail investors per member state of the European Union can invest. So that's basically a limitation, the 150 and the 5 million. And then all these investors, they cannot personally have tickets higher than 100,000 euros. This is when it comes to retail investors. These are the criteria that within 1 year, 12 months, you cannot exceed those 5 million, those 150 retail investors per country member of the European Union, and with tickets no higher than 100,000 euros. After 1 year, you can do it again, and then these things get reset. But when you want to address to accredited investors, there's no limitations, as it is being treated as a private placement, and it basically follows the securities laws from the European Union, from each member state. What is one thing that we see that is quite interesting, and what a lot of companies like about security tokens, is that part of their investment round can be done by funds or accredited investors, and it can be amplified with retail investors. So we see certain rounds that raise an amount like, for example, 10 million from a fund, but then they want to raise 1 or 2 million also from the crowd, and they do it all in the same round, but always following the rules of the maximum of 5 million from retail investors, etc. But especially for companies that have, for example, strong base of users, etc., it is an interesting way of basically converting your user of your product or service into also an investor, although it's in a minor representation. And one of the other things that, from a legal perspective, is very important is to comply with KYC and AML requirements. So it is very important that everyone that wants to participate in a security token offering, which is the initial issuance of the token, passes the KYC and AML test. And basically for the secondary market, it's also important. So most tokens cannot be traded if that person has not passed certain KYC requirements. When we look at the technical aspect of security tokens, obviously the security token is represented digitally in the form of token linked to a blockchain. This is possible in different types of blockchains. When I look at myself, in my experience, we have always worked with the Ethereum blockchain. This year there have been proposals to make a standard for security tokens, which is the ERC 1400. However, this is still a proposal in a very initial state. So for now, we've seen that most of the companies that launched security tokens did it all on the Ethereum ERC 20 standard. One of the things that we do notice is that what we have needed to do is to integrate a special whitelist in these tokens to comply with KYC and AML requirements. And this basically means that as soon as the person has passed the KYC AML, their token address, the address where they will receive their digital asset, is whitelisted. So it means they can receive the token, but if this person wants to send it to someone else, that person has to have complied with a certain KYC and AML process to be able to receive that token. So as soon as that other person has passed the KYC, his or her address also get whitelisted, and then they're able to transfer the token from one to another. This is the solution as of today, because obviously, as you probably know, this is a very new and innovative space, and that's also why these solutions probably will change in the next few years, when there's more clearance also from the European Union and how they would like to see this KYC AML requirements being visualized in it. But for now, it's as long as someone has passed the KYC, their address gets whitelisted, and then they can trade freely the security token issued by the company. I will briefly talk over the process of launching an SSDF. The first thing that has to be done when someone decides to raise funds by issuing a security token is to define the product that will be tokenized. So in the first initial stage, often there's a very big research on how the business model works, what the valuation obviously is, what revenues the company may or may not have, etc., to see what product suits best. And also this obviously has a very strong relation with what the founders of the companies want for their project, and also how they see involving it in a few years. So this process can be equity. Do we want to give voting rights to the investors, yes or no? Do we want a debt product, or what kind of product suits best in our business, and as well, what is the most attractive for an investor with the type of business that we have? Once that financial product that will be tokenized has been defined, an investment memorandum will have to be drawn. So in that investment memorandum, basically a variety of things appear. So first of all, the business model is very detailed, explained, the traction of the company, who is or a partner at the moment, who are the shareholders, and how is this divided. A lot of companies you see, they also include a bit of a projection for the next 5 years for investors to kind of like see where the project wants to go to and how they do. Then there's a section that explains the financial product. So for example, in the case of if the token represents equity, it tells all the rights that the investor gets from buying this tokenized equity, if there's voting rights, and if there are voting rights, how this takes into place, etc. There's a part obviously to inform the investor the risk, because obviously although the product is a very old traditional financial product, the representation digitally is very new. So by law, it's obligated to inform the investor of the potential risk that these kind of investments carry on, and that is mainly technological risk, but also risks of illiquidity in case there's no interest from investors in the secondary market, or if there are problems for secondary markets to take up, etc. And once this memorandum has been finalized, a broker-dealer intervenes to read the whole document, and he or she basically has to approve all the information that is been published in this memorandum. And mainly what they look for is if it's understandable, if it's clear, if it's objective, and if it's broad enough for an investor to make a well-informed decision on whether to participate in the investment round or not. Once that has been done, the technical development of the asset can start, and basically the asset, as it's digitized on the blockchain, it's built over smart contracts, and these smart contracts hold the rights that are stated in this memorandum. So that has certain differentiations from whether it's, for example, a convertible note or whether it's equity with voting rights. These rights are all stated in these smart contracts. And once that has been done, the initial sale of these tokens, which is basically the security token offering, can start. When these security token offerings take place, investors will have to onboard through a KYC, through a platform that holds KYC and AML requirements into account. So basically, the startup or company that is raising funds has enough information of their investors to make a well-informed decision on whether to allow them to participate or not. And depending from project to project, normally, but what we see normally is that the security token gets issued at the end of the STO to all its investors. And while onboarding and investing, investors leave a wallet in which they receive their tokens, and also where they will receive their dividends or interest. When it comes to the investment, it depends from obviously what the company wants, but we see that a lot of investment comes from fiat money, like euros or dollars mainly, and a smaller part still comes from cryptocurrencies. But basically, it's possible to accept fiat and cryptocurrencies at the same time, as it is fully compatible with both. This is also the same for when it comes to the payment of dividends or interest once the round is over and the company is continuing their efforts. They can be paid in the currency or cryptocurrency that the company prefers, or they can even offer the option to investors to select the currency that they prefer to receive their interest or dividends. Once this whole initial issuance of the asset has finished, the tokens can get listed on secondary markets. When it comes to security tokens, there are a few secondary markets, but they're still very in initial stages. Also, the legal requirements for them and the licenses, they have been granted over the past year, 1.5 years. So they are also still quite new products, but we see that there is, especially in Europe, several places like, for example, an exchange, and which is a Dutch exchange that is already allowed to work with security tokens. There's German exchange. We see more and more projects getting licensed to operate with these kinds of tokens. And in those secondary markets, obviously, anyone that is registered and passed the KYC can then buy the tokens of an investor of the project. And that is basically the process of launching an STO. When it comes to the timing, mostly the preparation takes between 2 to 3 months. And that includes also a bit of marketing, as we see that especially when it comes to companies that want to direct to retail investors, they definitely have to dedicate some time to PR and marketing. And the duration of an STO publicly, so that the actual round in which people can invest, normally takes around 2 months as well, but that depends a lot from company to company. Because what we've seen is that there are certain companies that direct themselves 100% to accredited investors, and they just dedicate time to talk with funds. And as soon as they have the funds interested in investing, the round goes very fast. But as I said before, when it comes to retail investors, there's a bit more preparational time required, because often that to attract the retail investor, you, especially digitally, do quite some efforts in marketing and public relations. And the costs vary a lot between country and country of launching an STO, and that's mainly because certain countries, they just charge higher for lawyers, etc. Broker dealers charge more. For example, case of Switzerland, where a lot of companies, because of the regulation, are attracted to, they are relatively high. But when you look at other European countries such as Spain, the costs are a lot lower, just because the cost of working with lawyers or broker dealers a lot less. And the good thing of doing it within any of the European member states is that it covers you for the full European Union. So, for example, if you decide to launch a security token offering out of Spain, you do the whole preparation of the investment memorandum with a Spanish broker dealer, but then after that, you are allowed to commercialize your token and your investment round, so to say, across the whole European Union under the same legal requirements. So that is one of the big benefits that we have been seeing for the past 1.5 years, that this is covering all of the European Union. When you look outside of the European Union, there are certain countries where it's a little easier to do it than certain a lot more complex, such as the United States. What we see a lot is that most of the companies that are doing it right now are that are from Europe. They basically focus on being fully compliant in Europe, and as soon as they have a big or notice a big interest, for example, from the United States, they get a legal opinion to be able to also sell their tokens in the United States. But here it also depends a lot. If you direct, for example, to a fund of the US, it's completely different to when you direct to retail investors in the US. So basically what we have seen is that the main focus is still in Europe, and then as soon as there's interest from a fund, they just get a legal opinion to be able to have this fund on board. And for retail investors, we've seen that there's for the moment, people are just waiting a bit to see whether that jurisdiction becomes a bit more clear on how to compliantly direct an investment round like this to retail investors. And so that's basically a bit on how to launch an STO in the process of digitizing an asset or security. I don't know if anyone maybe has some questions. I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, hello there. If anyone has a question, you can easily raise up your hand through the chat window, and we will open your microphone, or write it down through the chat. It seems there are No questions, Anna? Okay. So, thank you again, Anna, for your time today doing this great presentation. I think it's been really, really clarifying. For the audience, just to let you know that the session has been recorded, so you have it available also on YouTube. So through our Blockchers channels, you can watch it again. And that's it. Again, thank you, Anna, for your time today.
Thank you both for the invite.
Sure. And we'll keep in touch. Everyone, you have the Romani there on the screen, so if you want to put up some questions to her, feel free. Okay?
Great.
Thank you, Anna. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.